It was unexpected, quite frankly, that Gayle would invite me to participate with you here today. But I'm very honored that you did so, and we share a common bond with an old friend of many years, and that highlight in my life doing good things and even sometimes getting me in trouble, Peter Cameco. We've raised throughout the country of late a new slogan called legalization or no re-election. Just before coming here, I was interviewed by Marcos Gutierrez, who has a radio outlet in San Francisco, about today's event. And we announced the event, and I talked about that particular slogan. And he said, well, if you're raising that slogan, how is it that you're attending an event for a politician for her re-election? And it's absolutely juxtaposed to the very political fiber of her being, and the demonstration of her politics of uniting people, of supporting immigrants, of restoring good jobs to local communities, of being a good listener and being a good doer, and having an incredibly contagious smile. But I pose Gayle as the type of local elected official, as a state elected official, as a federal elected official, the type of elected official, the person who governs, who knows how to listen to the governed. This is the type of office holder that we require. We're living in special times. We have incredibly special challenges that require special responses from us. And this is why we raise this idea, this slogan that will evolve into a campaign, legalization or no re-election. Because, honestly speaking, I have no hope that there will be immigration reform this year that's fair, that's humane to working immigrants and to working America. This administration is not committed to it. The Democratic Party leadership is not committed to it. This Congress is not committed to it. Notwithstanding the fact that the Democratic Party has not had the margin of majority in both houses and the White House that it has today since the Jimmy Carter administration. Yet we still can't get the kind of fair and humane health care reform that we need and that we want. Single payer, for example. I've heard, many applaud it, and it was a positive sign and a step forward. But when you really examine it, really examine it, brothers and sisters, it's not the healthcare reform that we fought for. It's not the healthcare reform that we mobilized for. It's not the healthcare reform that we voted for. It's not the healthcare reform that America needs. It's a $45 billion soft to insurance companies. It's an insurance reform program. It's low, no cost, or no fault, the equivalent of no fault auto insurance that we have here in California in the healthcare sphere. And for immigrants, forget about it, because they were thrown under the bus. Women's rights were thrown under the bus. Public option was thrown under the bus. Corporate America reigns, predominates in that field. The pharmaceutical corporations reign predominant in that field, in that Congress, as never before. And that's the kind of healthcare reform that we got. And that's the kind of healthcare reform that now we got to fight to make it the kind that we truly need. Times when the Republican legislature in Arizona to make it a crime for being a human being without documents, make it a crime for being a worker. And the very next day that the Republican legislature of Arizona passed the legislation that it did, the most virulent anti-immigrant legislation in the history of our country, modern era, because certainly there were other periods, the Chinese Exclusion Act and other forms of exclusive, xenophobic immigrant policies and practices. But of the modern era, it's the most anti-immigrant type of legislation, and there's 14 other states that are preparing similar legislation, but we're waiting to see what would happen in Arizona. And the very next day, what happened? 800 federal agents directed by the Department of Homeland Security let loose a paramilitary operation against workers at a bus station. 800 federal officials. And what did they do? They detained 40 individuals for not having immigration status. That's the times that we're living under. And I would say that it's not just correlative of this administration or this White House. We saw that happen in the previous administration. But it has special meaning to us in that we fought so hard to change this administration. We fought so hard to change this Congress. We had such hopes for this president that would be a president that would truly meet his promises for immigration reform, and certainly not change immigration policies and practices more in the direction of the right instead of the left. We have not suffered the level of persecution that we're suffering today in all indicators of enforcement, detentions, deportations, the enforcement and detention of minors, the beefing up of the border. These types of paramilitary operations that occurred in Arizona this past week, we haven't seen this since the 1970s. And there's only one explanation that I can give to that. And it's another piece of information that I wanted to share with you that truly brings us together, but in a negative way and in a negative light. And that is the prison industrial complex of America. The prison industrial complex of California. How is it possible that a population that constitutes 7% of the population of California, I'm referring to the African American community, constitutes 47% of those that are in California prisons. Latinos that constitute approximately 36 to 40%, depends on who's counting, constitute 37% of the prison population in California. That began happening with a rapid increase in the building of public and private prisons under the Duke-Machen administration, and it hasn't stopped since. In fact, it even had a spurt under the Gray Davis administration. You know, I've studied this and studied this and studied this, and there's only 3 words that I can give you and share with you that I would like you to Google, to Yahoo, whatever engine that you use, search engine that you use. And I truly encourage you to look up these 3 words, and you will find the explanation for the rapid development of the prison industrial complex that has implications even for immigration, because they're privatized prisons, they call them detention centers, for immigrants exclusively throughout our country. This has happened with African Americans and Latinos and poor whites throughout the country. It's called the Depository Trust Company. Brothers and sisters, even though we're facing supposed deficits and a $12 trillion national debt, it is all bogus. Look at the Depository Trust Company in your Google search engine, and you will learn something phenomenal. What they do passes and manages through the Depository Trust Company each day $1 trillion of business, over $300 trillion in business annually. That's on the private side of our world. It's not the public side. The public side is deficit, debt, cutbacks, takeaways, giveaways, furloughs, deterring public education, increasing class sizes. That's on the public side. But on the private side, the wealthy are rolling in wealth. And if we taxed that derivative exchanges 1%, only 1%, let's not be greedy now. Only 1%. That would result in $3 trillion a year for America. That would wipe out in one term of the Obama administration the national debt. That would wipe out unemployment, create funds for infrastructure development, free university education for all. There would be no immigration problem. None whatsoever. You want a job? You got a job. There cannot be immigration reform in our country, brothers and sisters, unless there's a massive Marshall Plan for working people, for African Americans, for Latinos, throughout our country, to make sure that every single person that wants a job, a good paying job, and has a home that they have title to, that they own, that it's not in crisis of being taken by the banksters.